Ethan Cole was the kind of guy who saw a no trespassing sign as a personal invitation. It wasn't about being a rebel. It was pure, unfiltered curiosity. And that's exactly what dragged him and his girlfriend Jessa out to a desolate piece of farmland on the outskirts of Topeka. One cool September night, the locals had a name for it, the Warren Place. The story went that 30 years ago, their annual harvest festival ended in tragedy. A man just vanished into the corn, swallowed by the stalks, never to be seen again. Of course, Ethan didn't buy a word of it. To him, ghost stories were just dares disguised as folklore, and he was always up for a dare. As they pulled up in his beat-up old Jeep, the rusted gate groaned a rusty welcome. In front of them, endless rows of corn stood perfectly still, like an army frozen under the pale moonlight. The silence was the first thing that felt wrong. It was heavy, unnatural. No crickets chirping, no wind whispering through the leaves, just a thick, earthy smell of damp soil. Jessa, clutching her flashlight like a lifeline, turned to him. "You're sure about this?" Her voice was a small, nervous tremor in the quiet. Ethan just flashed that confident grin of his. "It's just a field," he said, trying to sound braver than he felt. "We'll walk in, film a few minutes for the channel, and walk right back out. Easy, famous last words, right?" They stepped past the gate and onto a narrow dirt path that sliced through the heart of the corn. The stalks towered over them, blotting out the horizon and turning the world into a claustrophobic, green-walled maze. Jessa stayed glued to his back, the beam of her flashlight dancing nervously over the dry, crackling leaves under their feet. It was a scene straight out of a horror movie, and for a moment, Ethan felt a thrill. This was exactly what he came for. We were about 15 minutes deep when Ethan suddenly stopped. He held up a hand, silencing Jessa's next question. "Hear that?" he whispered. Jessa froze, tilting her head. At first, there was only that suffocating silence. But then, drifting through the night air, came a sound. A faint, drawn-out note. It was a flute. The melody was slow, distant, almost beautiful. It wrapped around them, a strange, lonely sound in the middle of nowhere. "Someone's out here," Jessa whispered, her voice tight with fear. "Probably just a farmer," Ethan replied. But even to his own ears, the excuse sounded weak. Who would be playing a flute in a supposedly haunted cornfield in the middle of the night? The tune continued, a haunting melody that rose and fell in a perfect, hypnotic rhythm. It sounded ancient, like a forgotten folk song from another century. On a sudden impulse, Ethan switched off his flashlight, plunging them into the dim, silver light of the moon. "Don't do that," Jessa hissed, grabbing his arm. "I can't see anything." "Exactly," Ethan whispered back. "If someone's out here, I don't want them seeing us first." They moved forward, more cautiously now, drawn toward the source of the music. It was getting louder, closer. Every few steps, Ethan would pause, convinced he saw a flicker of movement between the stalks. But each time, it was just the corn leaves, rustling against his jacket like dry, skeletal fingers. Then, the flute's melody shifted. It twisted from a soft, gentle lullaby into something sharp, frantic, and discordant. It wasn't music anymore. It felt like a warning siren, screaming at them through the night. "Ethan, let's go back," Jessa pleaded, her voice barely a whisper. Ethan nodded, his own confidence finally shattered. But when he turned, his heart sank. The path behind them looked exactly the same as the path ahead. They were lost. And just as that terrifying realization hit them, the music stopped. The sudden, absolute silence was more terrifying than the flute had been. It pressed in on them, heavy and suffocating. Jessa grabbed Ethan's hand, her pulse hammering against his palm like a trapped bird. Then they heard it, a new sound. It wasn't footsteps. It wasn't the rustle of leaves. It was a slow, dragging sound, like something heavy, something limp, being pulled slowly through the dirt. It was coming from there, right? Just a few feet away, hidden within the corn. Ethan reacted without thinking. He swung his flashlight in the direction of the sound, the beam cutting a sharp white line through the darkness. The light landed on a scarecrow. It was slumped between two stalks, its clothes torn and tattered. But its face, its burlap face, had been ripped open, leaving two dark, empty sockets that seemed to stare right through him. It's just old," he stammered, his voice cracking. But as he said it, he knew it was a lie. This felt different. This felt wrong. And then the flute began again. This time, it wasn't in the distance. It was right behind them. The notes were faster now, chaotic, circling them like a predator. Ethan didn't need another warning. He grabbed Jessa's arm. "Run!" And they ran. They crashed through the rows of corn, the dry leaves like paper razors slashing at their faces and arms. The frantic sound of the flute chased them, weaving through the stalks, seemingly everywhere at once. It was alive. It was hunting them. Ethan didn't dare look back. He just focused on the desperate need to escape. Suddenly, the ground gave way beneath Jessa. She cried out as she stumbled, falling hard to her knees. Ethan whipped around, swinging the flashlight back to help her up. The beam illuminated her terrified face, and in that split second, Ethan froze. His blood ran cold. Because standing in the corn right behind her was a figure. It was tall, impossibly tall, and wrapped in something dark that shimmered faintly in the moonlight. In its long, slender hands, it clutched a flute that looked like it was carved from bone. Ethan couldn't move. He couldn't breathe. The air was stolen from his lungs. The figure slowly lifted the bone flute to where its mouth should be, but no sound came out. Instead, a voice echoed through the field, a voice that was hollow, ancient, and utterly devoid of life. It wasn't spoken, it was felt. "You heard the harvest song," it whispered across the field. "Now you stay." That broke the spell. Adrenaline surged through Ethan. He yanked Jessa to her feet, and they bolted, running with a desperation he had never known. He had no idea how long they ran or in which direction. They just ran from the voice, from the figure, from the bone flute. Finally, gasping for air, they burst out of the cornfield, stumbling back onto the dirt road. And the moment they were free, the music stopped. The air went still. They scrambled back to the Jeep, hands trembling as Ethan fumbled with the keys. The engine roared to life. The headlights flickered on, illuminating the rusted gate ahead. And standing right beside it, watching them with an unnerving stillness, was the same figure. It hadn't moved. It was just waiting. Ethan didn't hesitate. He slammed his foot on the accelerator. The tires squealed, kicking up a cloud of dirt and gravel as they sped away into the darkness, leaving the Warren place behind. And as they drove, carried faintly on the night wind, they heard it one last time. A single, haunting, final note from the bone flute. Thanks for watching, everyone. I hope this story gave you a few chills. If you enjoyed it, please hit that like button. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss our next adventure. Stay safe out there. Claire Winters hated the quiet hours between midnight and 3. Pinebrook Hospital, tucked deep in the woods of northern Alabama, always seemed silent during that stretch. Even the hum of the fluorescent lights sounded uneasy, like they wanted to stop working but were too afraid to. She worked as a pharmacy technician, stocking supplies for surgeries and handling late medication orders. The hospital had shut down half its west wing a decade ago after a fire, but the staff still passed it every night. Most people avoided looking down that corridor. Claire tried not to think about it at all. That night began like any other. She clocked in at 6, grabbed her cart, and waved to Dr. Silas Marin, the night supervisor, who always looked half asleep. "Same routine?" she asked. He nodded without glancing up from his clipboard. "Same as always. Stay out of the West Wing, Claire. You know the rules." She rolled her eyes, like I'd ever want to go there. The night passed slowly. She filled drawers, logged orders, and listened to the distant beep of machines echoing through the halls. By 2:30, she was alone in the pharmacy room, trying to keep herself awake with cold coffee when the intercom clicked on. It wasn't unusual to hear codes being called out late at night, patients staff being paged, but this time, the voice was wrong. It was low, shaky, almost like someone whispering into the microphone. "Code blue, room 10, West Wing." Claire froze. She stared at the ceiling speaker. Room 109 didn't exist anymore. It was one of the rooms destroyed in the fire. A chill ran through her chest. She pushed the thought away, convincing herself it was a system glitch. She turned back to her paperwork. But before she could pick up her pen, the intercom clicked again. "Claire, come to room 109. The mug slipped from her hand, shattering on the floor. She stumbled backward, heart pounding so hard, she felt it in her throat. She grabbed her phone and called the front desk. "Carol, did you just hear that announcement?" "Hear what?" Carol's voice was calm, confused. "Someone just called a code blue in room 109. They said my name." There was a short pause. "Claire, the system's been quiet for an hour. Are you okay?" She hung up without answering. Maybe she was just tired. Maybe her brain was playing tricks after too many caffeine-fueled shifts. Still, she couldn't shake the urge to check the West Wing. Something in that voice felt too real. She grabbed her flashlight and walked past the elevators, toward the locked double doors, marked restricted access. They should have been sealed. But tonight, one side hung slightly open. A faint smell of smoke drifted out. Her light beam sliced through the darkness, catching broken tiles and scorched walls. The air was thick and heavy. She stepped inside, her shoes crunching over debris. At the far end of the hallway, she saw a flicker of movement. A shadow passed from one side of the hall to the other. She stopped breathing. "Hello," she whispered. Her voice echoed down the corridor. No answer. As she moved forward, the temperature dropped sharply. Her breath fogged in front of her face. She could see old room numbers burned onto the doors: 101, 103, 105. When she reached the door marked 109, she noticed it wasn't burned at all. It looked freshly painted, untouched by fire. The knob turned easily under her hand. Inside, the room looked clean. New bed, new monitors, no dust, no signs of decay. Then the intercom above the bed crackled to life. "You're late, Claire." She backed toward the door, but it slammed shut on its own. The overhead lights flickered on, revealing something she couldn't explain: an outline of a man standing by the window, his hospital gown charred black. His face was pale, blistered, eyes milky and unfocused. He lifted a trembling hand toward her. "I called for help," he rasped. "No one came. You left us." Claire shook her head. "No, I wasn't here. I wasn't even working." When his voice grew louder, overlapping itself, turning into multiple voices speaking at once. You left us to burn." The machines beside the bed began to beep wildly, though none were plugged in. The heart monitor drew a perfect line across its screen. Claire ran for the door. It wouldn't open. She turned and kicked it hard, again and again, until it burst open with a crash. She bolted down the hall, the sound of alarms following her. When she reached the main corridor, everything went silent. The intercom clicked one last time. "Thank you for visiting room 109. The next morning, Dr. Marin found her sitting outside in the staff parking lot, shaking. She quit that day. Pinebrook Hospital has been closed ever since. Yet sometimes, at 2:30 in the morning, residents nearby say they can still hear the faint buzz of the intercom calling for a code blue in room 109. Noah Graves had always been the skeptic among his friends. He never believed in hauntings or curses, only in bad luck and darker sides of human nature. That changed the night he and Emery Vaughn drove out to Hollow Creek Bridge. It was a cold November evening, the kind where mist hugged the ground and everything looked half drowned in fog. The bridge stretched across a shallow river at the bottom of an old valley, its metal railings covered in rust, and its boards creaking under the weight of passing cars. According to local legend, a woman named Lena Howell had thrown herself from that bridge in the early 1970s after her husband vanished. People claimed her spirit still lingered, calling out for him whenever fog covered the water. "Let's get some proof tonight," Emery said, adjusting his camera on the dashboard. "A full live stream. Maybe we'll finally get views." Noah laughed. "Sure, man. Nothing like exploiting dead people for content." Emery grinned and started recording. "This is Hollow Creek. Local legend says if you stop your car in the middle of the bridge at midnight, turn off your lights, and whisper her name 3 times, she appears." It was 11:58 when they reached the center. Fog clung to the bridge so thick it hid everything beyond the headlights. They shut off the engine and silence wrapped around them like a blanket. Emery held up the camera. 3 times, right? This is dumb, Noah muttered, but he leaned forward anyway. Together they whispered, Lena Howell, Lena Howell, Lena Howell. Nothing happened, just a sound of dripping water below. Emery chuckled. See, all myths. Still creepy though. Then, from somewhere under the bridge, came a single splash. They froze. Another splash followed, closer, heavier. Noah turned on the headlights, but the fog swallowed the light hole. Probably a fish, he said, though his voice lacked conviction. Emery pointed the camera toward the passenger window. Wait, do you see that? Noah looked. A faint outline stood near the railing, tall, still, hair hanging in a curtain that glimmered wet in the lights. That's someone, Noah whispered. Maybe another group filming. The figure didn't move. The mist thickened until she vanished from sight. Turn the car on, Noah said. Emery fumbled for the keys, but the ignition refused to catch. The engine clicked and sputtered. The camera in Emery's hands began to flicker. Static rolled across the screen, followed by the distorted shape of a woman's face. Eyes dark and hollow, mouth open, but UNMOVING. Double quotes. Emery, turn it off. It's not recording anymore, Emery said, shaking the camera. It's showing us. A whisper filled the car. Soft, fragile, like it came from underwater. You shouldn't have called me. Noah spun toward the back seat. Nothing there. He reached for the door handle, but it was ice. The locks clicked shut by themselves. Fog pressed against the windows like hands from the outside. The whisper grew louder. He promised he'd come back. Emery's flashlight rolled across the dashboard and landed upright, its beam facing the windshield. Standing right beyond the glass was the woman. Her hair hung heavy with water, her dress clinging to her frame. Her eyes were empty pits that reflected nothing. Start the car, Emery, Noah said. His voice cracked. Emery tried again. The engine roared to life on the third turn. Noah slammed his foot on the pedal, but the tires only spun, screeching on the slick boards. Lena lifted her hand, pressing her palm against the windshield. Water streaked from her skin, as though she'd just crawled out of the river. The glass began to crack under her touch, thin lines spreading outward like spiderwebs. Drive, Noah shouted. The car jolted forward, tires finally gripping. As they shot across the bridge, the windshield shattered outward, sending shards flying into the fog. They didn't stop until they reached the next town. Both of them sat in silence, shaking. The live stream was still running on Emery's phone. The chat was flooded with comments. Who was that behind you? We saw her before you, said her name. Look at the window. She's still there. Noah replayed the footage. Before they had even reached the bridge, before they said her name, a reflection appeared in the back seat. A woman's face, pale and dripping with water, smiling faintly at the camera. They deleted the video that night, but copies surfaced online within hours. Every version cuts off at the same frame, the cracked windshield, and Lena's hand reaching inside. Noah hasn't driven at night since. Emery refuses to go near bridges at all. Locals say that on foggy nights, Hollow Creek Bridge hums like something alive, as if the wind itself carries her whisper. And if you stop in the middle too long, you might hear her say, very softly, you promised you'd come back.